All right, listen, I've been anticipating having this guest on for some time because it's been the major headline, and she said it was going to happen, and it has. So let's welcome back the city controller from Pittsburgh, Rachael Heisler, who joins me now on the Metropolitan Window video screen. You can see this interview streamed live by going to kdkradio.com. So you said it would happen. It has. How bad really is it right now when it comes to finances in the city? Rachael, good evening.
Hi, Rob. It's great to be here. I hope I'm included moving forward in the Pratt Pack. It's a pretty cool name.
Thank you.
So, city finances, thank you. City finances in 2024 turned out pretty close to what we predicted they would. I was sworn in last January, and pretty quickly we realized that city finances were headed towards we had some really concerning numbers on the horizon. And chief among them was our real estate tax. 25% of all city revenue comes from real estate taxes, and 25% of that, 25% is the downtown triangle, our golden triangle. We issued $33 million in refunds last year. And there are some other concerning issues, right? Our deed transfer tax, where we have derived extensive revenue in the last 5 years. I think we exceeded $60 million. We were off budget by $11 million. So we have some concerning trends. There were some bright spots too. Amusement and parking taxes, which had cratered during the pandemic. The amusement tax in 2020 brought in, I think, $2.5 million. Hit pre-pandemic levels. Parking has fully rebounded too. But at the end of the day, our operating budget brought in $704 million and spent $699 million. So that does not include, however, the transfers out. So we sent $10 million to the URA Housing Opportunity Fund. We sent $2.5 million to the URA for their housing bond. We sent nearly $10 million to the Stop the Violence Fund. So the overall trend that you can derive from last year and what we predict will continue to happen moving forward is we are spending more than we're receiving in revenue. And without a plan to grow or to modify spending, we will have to make really hard decisions down the road when we don't have any other options. An example of this, we just posted on our Twitter page, but we're having this conversation right now because we had an emergency over the last 8 days in the city of Pittsburgh. We've cut the number of tree pruners in the city from 10 to 7. And we've cut the number of laborers by about 15. So when you look for an emergency response for something like that, those terrible storms, I think there are close to 5,500 people who still don't have power in the city of Pittsburgh. That's an impact, right? That's a real life impact. And we did an audit actually of this Shade Tree Trust Fund. It came out 2 years ago. And we said that the city doesn't have the capacity to work in an emergency with these trees because we don't have the staffing. And that's part of what happened. Obviously, city council and the administration will work together to do an analysis of the emergency response, but those are real life impacts. And my big concern is just moving forward, we need to figure out how to grow revenue. 50% of all tax revenue in the city comes from city residents via the real estate tax or the wage tax. So we need to figure out how to grow that revenue in a way that doesn't burden city residents further. We also need to figure out what expenses can we cut? What expenses should we cut? What expenses can't we cut? Because we have no plan right now to control costs. So we're very worried, but I want to reiterate that 2024 was actually an okay year, all things considered. But for the last 4 years, our budget has been, our revenue has been inflated because of the American Rescue Plan Act. We deposited that last deposit. It was about $46.5 million in February of 2024. There was no deposit in February of 2025, right? That money is done. The funds have been encumbered. And so moving forward, we'll spend down the rest of that money. But we don't have that operating budget, that deposit into the operating budget to boost those revenue figures in 2025 or moving forward.
So does the mayor listen? Do you have his ear?
So what I would say is last April, we put out a proposal. I think I don't know if I was on here talking about it, but I know Kdka radio covered it. And our projections were off in the aggregate by $2 million. And the administrations were off by 10, right? Those projections, ours were closer to reality. What I will say is our projections for 2025, we updated 2024 and 2025 in the years moving forward. The administration seems to have taken that into consideration and adopted our likely scenario for 2025 when they presented their budget to council last fall, which was much more conservative, but I believe is a much more realistic expectation of where things will end up at the end of this year.
You talked about the much-needed tax dollars of the residents of Pittsburgh. Rachael Heisler, the city controller of Pittsburgh, joining me now on KDK, and of course streaming this video on the Metropolitan Window video screen. Go to kdkradio.com, click on KDK Watch. One of the things you don't want to have happen are people starting to leave Pittsburgh because they're losing services. Yeah. So you want to grow, but you want to keep the people who are in the city of neighborhoods, right?
Yeah, we absolutely need to make sure we do everything we can to keep people here. It includes figuring out how to get our Pittsburgh Public Schools working for families that live in the city of Pittsburgh. It includes making sure we don't cut services, right? What can we do to make sure that we're attracting police officers? I was just at the Southside Slopes community meeting, and every single question, with the exception of the ones that focused on blight, but all tied back to public safety. I was really fortunate. I did a Zone 3 ride-along on a Friday night, overnight in early March, and got to see our law enforcement officers working. And they knew the name of every person who wasn't housed, and they knew the name of the folks who were struggling with addiction. And they are proactively working in the community. The Violence Prevention Unit has done unbelievable work on the South Side. So we want to keep moving those programs and projects forward to make sure that we're keeping people safe and keeping things clean.
What was that like, that experience? That's something I've always wanted to do. What was that like, being up front and really up close to all of this stuff?
So I've done an overnight with fire, an overnight with police, and I've done a 12-hour shift with our paramedics downtown, and I did a 10-hour shift with OCHS, which is the co-response. It's a police officer and a social worker out of Zone 5, which is the one on Washington Boulevard. I'll share to the best that I can because I want to protect this person's privacy. But I ended up on the 62nd Street Bridge with someone who was actively threatening to die by suicide. And a police officer showed up after 45 minutes of negotiation with various stakeholders, including two passerbys that just, Good Samaritans who stopped to talk to this guy. And a police officer who was trained in this type of negotiation showed up, and the guy has received medical care, and I don't know how he's doing now. Well, I hope, but I do think all of our public safety, these first responders that we see, are tireless public servants. Like I did 12 hours with the medics. I slept for a day and a half afterwards because it's exhausting and
stressful.
I was out with firefighters at midnight in a very cold February, I think, February night. So I owe them, we all owe them a debt of gratitude. And I think particularly with medics and with police right now, we have very serious staffing issues, very serious. We need to do everything we can to retain our current workers, our current medics, our current police officers, but also attract new ones. And what can we do to make this an attractive career for young people who are trying to figure out what they want to do? The city created the Freedom House Academy to bring in new EMTs, which is wonderful, but our police staffing numbers are very concerning. And I think we need to do absolutely everything we can to make sure that we're retaining those cops, but we're also attracting folks who want to go into law enforcement. And part of that is, of course, changing the conversation and the cultural tone and how we talk about it.
Listen, I only have about a minute and a half before I got to get to a break. The Controller City of Pittsburgh, always candid. That's what I really respect about her, Rachael Heisler. So what do we do to create cash flow? Do you have any thoughts on that? And obviously others will be involved, but some of the things where you see you could actually capitalize on and get some money coming into Pittsburgh.
Well, I think the first thing is to realize that these 25 and 26 are two really, really difficult years. We punted a debt payment from 2020, which was the right thing to do because we didn't know what was gonna happen in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic. Things will rebound with revenue and particularly with expenditures, not with revenue, in 2027, 2028. So yes, we need to figure out how to bring in that revenue. I think we need to continue to have an actual conversation with our 5 nonprofit partners in the city of Pittsburgh. You don't get there through a courtroom. You get there through conversation. And then we need to figure out how to keep people here. I didn't grow up in Pittsburgh. I moved here to go to college and I stayed. And I think there are a lot of people, a lot of young adults who are graduating from college this week, last week, and are trying to figure out where they want to go and how do we make Pittsburgh a place they want to stay. And we have a crop of people who we can go after really quickly and really easily. How do we do that?
Hey, the phone works both ways. If I can help you, please reach out. You're truly one of the best at what you do, and obviously gives me a lot of hope in the future when it comes to our government. Thank you very much, okay?
Take care, Rob. Great to see you.
All right, City Controller Pittsburgh, Rachael Heisler. We'll dissect the conversation on the other side of this break. Stay with us.